Oh, Justice Moore, you don't need to stay up if you don't want to then.
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay, you're welcome to stay, please. Mr. Stevens, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Nelson. We actually met last time I was here, I think it was a couple years ago, and I want to thank all of you for having me again.
We started a good conversation back then, too. I remember.
Sir. Yes, sir. As you know, or may not remember, I'm a 4-tour combat veteran from Afghanistan, returned home to a new home in Marin County after those 4 tours in 2010. I started volunteering in the Veteran Service Office for a gentleman who at that time was 92 years old. His name was Mort Talon. I volunteered with him for 8 months, and then I was offered the job after he decided it was time to retire. During that time period, I was given the opportunity to go to San Quentin as a volunteer and meet with veterans just like myself, in the sense that they were suffering from issues related to their time in the service. Once I was given the job as Veteran Service Officer, I decided to keep that relationship with San Quentin and visited there on a regular basis, helping those veterans to understand the benefits that they're entitled to. Senator Roth, to answer to your question as far as the VA medical services, every veteran that I came in contact with, I did an application called 1010EZ, which is the application for VA healthcare. And I did that with the intent that if that veteran was to be released prior to me catching them out the gate, maybe they left while the 2 weeks between the time I was there last, however it happened, I made sure that their information was in the VA healthcare system so that no matter where they went, they were able to get into a healthcare facility immediately. Now, I did bring 2 veterans with me today. This gentleman here, Ted Wilson, is a lifer, 30 years at San Quentin, 3-strike offense, Vietnam veteran, 2 Purple Hearts. However, the problem is that he had a dishonorable discharge. And the thing is that he wouldn't have been caught by the VSRR or the Veterans Records Program where they react with DOD and stuff like that. He wouldn't have gotten that opportunity to do the paperwork and so forth. As a matter of fact, he had tried prior to going in. He wasn't eligible for health care. He wasn't eligible for psych services at that time when he first got home from Vietnam. We got him started in doing the paperwork when 2012. Once we discovered each other and started that paperwork. As of about 3 weeks ago, for VA purposes, his discharge was overturned. He's now eligible for full VA health care, and his claim for issues related to the shrapnel still in his back and wounds on his arms, he is now eligible for services as well as benefits. He will be a success story. He is a success story. He's out. He's been out for 3 years. The other gentleman, Dan is was at CTF, and he's here to tell his story. 22 years, joined the military in 1987, and didn't access benefits. Not uncommon for that time period, because it wasn't the big military push to say, hey, you have benefits at the VA. But the thing is, sir, is that the VA medical, VA benefits, those are what have helped me to do the life I do, as well as these gentlemen being forced to remind me that, you know what, if I decide to make that left turn, this is where I'll be in San Quentin. And let me tell you, those things happen. That car that cuts you off, that you go into mode that is not, unfortunately, not normal civilian life, to decide, I'm going to get out of my car. But no, I'm not going to get out of my car because I know what it can do. I know where that goes and where that leads. And one last thing, and then I'll let these gentlemen take the floor. To Justice Ellen Moore, one of the things that I'm doing is, for instance, on May 25th, I'll be speaking to the Marin Bar Association and talking to them about Mill 100. The form Mill 100 is a great form, and it should be implemented in the justice system and should be made mandatory for the veterans to use in the courts because of the fact that it does identify them as veterans. And a lot of veterans don't think that they're entitled to benefits because they're not missing an arm or a leg. They weren't shot. They didn't see combat. But the fact of the matter is, these veterans raised the right hand, and they said that they will do whatever the military asks. And sometimes they don't get asked to do much. Maybe it might be just to do admin work. But then there are those veterans who get asked to deploy to combat zones and to do admin work. So the fact of the matter is, if you raise your right hand, you're a veteran, and you are entitled to benefits one way or another, either through the VA or through private organizations. Thank you.
Okay, the gentleman in the hat cap, just your first name if you'd prefer, or your whole name if you like, sir.
Thank you, Senators. My name is Ted Wilson, and I'll be kind of brief with my story. I joined the military when I was 16, and I ended up in Vietnam at the age of 17. I did 13 months. I saw a lot of action. I got wounded twice, and when they tried to send me back, that's when me and the military had a problem. The 30 years that I did in prison was off and on after I came back from Vietnam. Nobody knew about PTSD, and nobody knew about issues that we had brought back to the United States. We couldn't talk to anyone because we were labeled as crazy Vietnam vets. So we carried that inside of us for myself 50 years. During that time, I self-medicated to help me sleep sometime at night, to help me ease nightmares away. That's how I started going to prison. And I went in and out because I was trying to get money to accumulate drugs to help myself medicate. Once I got to San Quentin, I had never heard of a veteran service officer. A lot of veterans that went to Vietnam didn't want anything to do with the VA because they hated the VA, because the VA did nothing when we first came back. So a lot of them don't say they're veterans because they don't want to deal with the VA. I went to San Quentin and I joined this group called Veterans Healing Veterans. And I met people who were sincerely concerned about my condition, and they began to help me. I listened to these people up here. The answers don't come out of a book. You can't take a set of rules and say, okay, we're going to implement this and make it work. It's the person that you deal with that makes it work. I met Sean Stevens. I had never heard of a veteran service officer, but he took an interest in my case, and he took an interest in me, and he showed me compassion. I met Mary Donovan. I met EO. These people showed compassion. They volunteered their services to come into a prison like San Quentin and help veterans. So that got me to thinking. So I've been out 3 years. I volunteer a lot to pay back. I volunteer at colleges. I've spoken at different organizations, and I've been interviewed by a few newspapers. My answer is, what they need is more people with compassion to help these veteran service officers inside the prison. Because like I say, a vet won't come forward because he don't trust the VA. And thank you.
Sir, please.
Thank you for this opportunity, Senator. My name is Dan Scott, and I was a term-to-life prisoner, and I was paroled after 22 years of continuous incarceration. And I was blessed at around 2007 into my incarceration to be involved in a veteran support group within Salinas Valley State Prison. That is where I was starting to experience the camaraderie and the fellowship that fellow veterans support in one another and in themselves. Prior to that, I was not aligned or finding any kind of veteran group in my prison history. From there, about a year into that, an outreach was being done, and so we had, from the Veteran Transition Center in Monterey, a very compassionate man come in, and he did a workshop, and he asked for incarcerated veterans to write letters to currently returning combat veterans and try to reach out to them from a perspective of being willing to ask for help and to try to do something before maybe something catastrophic happens in their lives and they might be in the shoes that I was in. So I started to write these letters of my experience and strength and hope, and started to send those out to this gentleman through the Veteran Transition Center. So a relationship started to build with me and that organization. Fast forward some time, I go through several parole hearings. It was instrumental in my parole hearing process that the commissioners acknowledged that I was going to be going to the VTC, that I was fortunate enough to utilize the services that Lieutenant De La Rosa talked about, and those guys there had gotten me enrolled in the veteran medical health care program. So I was able to get enrolled and integrated into a lot of the VA services that I never knew nothing about while I was going through my parole hearing processes. And that gave me a sense of comfort and calm, knowing that I was going to be not such a burden on community resources, and that it restored a sense of dignity, that I had something that I had earned and it was going to be available to me. And at my fourth hearing, I was granted suitability, and after 163 days, I was freed. The Veteran Transition Center was at the gate to pick me up, and I went to a program. Since that time, I've been able to become very involved in the veteran mental health program, peer support program, the medical program itself, and just really get all the wraparound services that were available, because in the Fort Ord area right there, there's a new clinic being built, there's another clinic, there's a shuttle program to get me to Palo Alto. I received a TBI when I was in service, and that time it wasn't acknowledged. I was ran over, my head was smashed. We're looking into that in a polytrauma kind of a medical field that's new, that's evolved. And so I'm just very grateful to be able to get these services. And the neat thing is I've been able to align myself and give back. And so I've heard about the Veteran Treatment Court, and Thursday I'll be sitting in the Monterey County Courthouse with the guy that I'm a mentor to, because I'm a mentor in the Veteran Treatment Court within Monterey County. And I'm able to use my experience, all the years of growing and healing, to try to help guide this young man while he's in some troubled waters right now, and hopefully navigate with him while he can get himself corrected. And so it's just a real pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate you letting me share a little bit of my story.
Well, I praise and congratulate you, sir. You definitely demonstrated your suitability to the parole board. Further, you've demonstrated amends. You understand what that is, and you continue to make amends and contributions to society. And I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Senator Nutt.
Senator Roth, any questions of this panel?
Well, just a comment and a question. Well, first, gentlemen, thank you for your military service. Justice, thank you for yours in Vietnam and beyond. I just have a question about the Judicial Council form that you indicated was optional. Did the Judicial Council indicate a reason at the time that that decision was made as to why the form would be optional as opposed to mandatory?
It's my understanding that a few people wrote in and said, this is an invasion of people's privacy if you force them to reveal that they have been a veteran, because some people, for the reasons that these these Vietnam vets, or these vets just stated, that some people just want to keep it to themselves that they are a veteran. But it does appear from everything we've heard today that it's very important for a system to know who our veterans are and when they are in the courts.
Well,
But we tried to get it to be a mandatory form, and we were unsuccessful.
It's one thing to keep that to oneself, but once you enter the court system, lots of things that are not private or that are private no longer become private. Has there been an attempt to revisit that issue at the Judicial Council level since that point in time?
No, no, Senator, there has not been. But Senator, may I say one thing to you?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I was so glad to hear all the questions you were asking about the VA, and after hearing from these two gentlemen, something has to come between prison and being out in the real world, and I think we just heard some descriptions of that. And I remember one fellow, when he went into prison, we didn't have the stoplights that held up the red hand, and there he was so concerned for all these years to follow all the prison rules and regulations, and he got in the middle of the street and the red hand went up and he absolutely panicked. He didn't know, should I stop? Should I go? Should I go back? Because they don't want to violate any rules, and I was really happy to hear all those questions you were asking.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, please, you have something more to
I'd like
offer?
to say one thing, Senator. It took me 50 years to have a person say, thank you for your services and welcome home, vet. And that made me feel good.
Well, you're appreciated here, sir. You're appreciated for that service, but you're also appreciated for what you've done. You made some mistakes in life, but you've corrected those ways. You've given back, and you've given back multifold because you're giving back to others, helping mentor them on the path that they won't get down that sorry track. Yes, sir. That's a gift, sir.
Thank you.
It truly is. Justice Moore, we're very honored to have you here. Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make to Senator Roth and I before we start to, we want to bring the secretaries up again and then have public comment. Anything you'd like to add?
I just want to thank you very much. I have, in one of the envelopes, and I gave it to Mr. Teasdale before, but I want to point out that I do pay attention to all these statutes that you've come out with, and this article came out, it's written by me in California litigation, and an attempt to try to get some education out to the state bar about everything you've been doing, and I really meant it when I said I am thrilled that you're interested in doing more for veterans, and I'm available to you for any assistance that you might need.
We welcome that relationship. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Secretary Kernan and Secretary Imboski, if you could come forward again. Gentlemen, you began this, and it's entirely appropriate that you'd help us finish it off. I think it's been very instructive and heartwarming. At least I believe I speak for myself and Senator Roth. How do you gentlemen feel about it? Secretary Kernan, any observations to sum it up for us?
Well, I tell you, I'm so proud of my staff that come up here. You know the staff, their heart is into it. And the Justice and I have talked about things we could do. I don't believe that the department's doing enough yet, but I think with my partner, we learned a lot today about how we might be able to improve the system, how we look at how we can identify people and get them services, and I really appreciate you guys taking your time and shining a light on this important subject, so thank you very much.
Well, Secretary Kernan, your folks showed so much initiative on their own, and you know, that's gratifying, and it certainly instills in me a commitment to try to do a little bit more from where we sit here, if we can. And Secretary Bastiani, same with you folks. Your team, obviously, they're out there stepping up to the plate and doing the very best they can. And your veteran service officers, you know, I intimately know the challenges that they face and the limited resources they contend with. And I've been out and seen their offices and been with them. And And we've heard some things here today that are very encouraging, too. How would you like to sum it up with us?
Thank you, Senator. You did say the word, would you like to us too, would you like to finish up here? This is, as you said before, this is a start, not a finish.
It is.
And, but what a beautiful road that seems to be opening in front of us. Many people probably think of justice as a very harsh subject, but boy, what we heard this afternoon, I'm so glad we sat through this, is a lot of compassion and goodwill and charity to fellow man. We're going to capitalize on that. I think that these two departments that we represent can work together, maybe in ways that we haven't worked before, and I think we see how we can do that. Maybe better catchment at entry, getting more information. We can communicate maybe better with our CVSOs. And I'm wondering if the model, I'm not promulgating it, but I'm wondering if the model of the treatment court, which now exists in only 24 of our counties, might look more attractive to other parts of the state.
Oh, I think most assuredly it does. And that's part of our mission from our small pulpit here, is to showcase the success of those courts. And I can do it with a passion, because I've seen it at the local level in Butte County. We see it at maybe even a larger scale level here. And that gives us that more bully pulpit. And indeed, we are talking about justice, but we're also talking about giving people's second chances and other opportunities in life, and doing what is justice to our veterans. And that's a noble mission for all of us. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have the opportunity for some public comment. Are there any members of the audience there that would like to come forward and offer some public comment before we close? Our Hall of Famer, Mr. Conady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No hearing would be complete without me making public comment. And I'm not wearing my Purple Heart today because I gave it to Ted Wilson, because he earned 2 of them in Vietnam. But I really have to commend both of you senators and Wade and Gary, because this is a subject long overdue, and we've made a lot of steps towards helping veterans in prison. And I want to separate that out from Veterans Treatment Court, because we're talking about veterans that are already in prison. There is issues we can deal with on Veterans Treatment Courts. But out of this hearing, I think should come that I would recommend that CDCR and CalVet, with their stakeholders, form a working group to address the issues that can be handled and discussed today by administrative action that doesn't require any legislation. For example, data collection. You get all the stakeholders involved, we can do a better job on data collection. I would also recommend that CDCR have trained veterans service officers on their staff in the prison, because the amount of money we would save the state of California on its correctional system if we can help veterans get benefits and turn their lives around and get out of prison. I got a comment on Eric DeRosa and his lifer friend Ed Muniz, who started the program in Soledad 2009, whenever, and I've been in touch with them. I knew Ed before he went to prison. And I would recommend that this committee have a hearing down in Soledad, and that Soledad be looked at as a model for the entire state. And now I'm going to tell you about my dream. My dream would be for a rehearing on all combat Vietnam veterans who are still in prison, who were sentenced for their crimes before we knew about PTSD, before we knew about the effects of the Vietnam War on them. I think there are a lot of people like Ted Wilson who are still in prison who could turn their lives around if given a chance. But again, thank you so much for having this hearing. Thank you, sir.
Well, Mr. Connerty, I can reflect on something that I was a part of as a senator my first time around, and then later worked with as chairman of the Board of Prison Terms with Senator Speer and Kuehl. And it was what was called battered women syndrome. And they were wanting to do something in the area. And as chairman of the board, Prison Terms, you couldn't let BWS be a means of exoneration of the commission of a crime. But I worked with them on that legislation, which generally put, we wrote it such that it would be taken and weighted as a factor in mitigation, in consideration, and which would result in the opportunity for an earlier release, if you will. A consideration of those circumstances that caused them to do that. That BWS, it was pioneering legislation. They were the authors of it. I was not. I was coming at it from the tough Board of Prison Terms chairman guy, all about justice for crimes done. But I saw merit in weighing these extenuating or mitigating circumstances. There may be some fruit in thoughts related here to post-traumatic stress disorder too. I don't know that. That's just a thought off the top of my head here today. Certainly, the young gentleman here who testified and was found suitable by the board, and that's not a generous board even today. I have no doubt that they took into account the insight that he had in the rehabilitation and the introspection that he had gained. And that's all food for thought as we proceed. Pete. Ladies and gentlemen, oh, one more, I'm sorry. Please, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for holding the hearing today and inviting us to be here today. I'm Terry Bear I'm humble and proud to be the director of the Veterans Transition Center of Monterey County, which has been mentioned here a couple of times. And I want to thank you for the work that you're doing for our veterans. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your service, sir, as well. As an Air Force retiree, I appreciate your Air Force career there also. But, I came up here, I was going to try to give a humble or an inspirational story and tell you about what we're doing here, but I think Dan beat me to that, so I'm not going to say any more. But I do want to acknowledge Ted and Dan, and I think if there's any doubt as to why we do this and to the efforts and the lengths we go to, I think there should be none, because they represent the spirit of our veterans and the need to assist them to the extent that we possibly can. So thank you for your service. Just real quickly, we represent as a nonprofit. We do a lot of work inside the prison while the veterans are incarcerated. But I think what we offer that needs support is that our program provides a landing spot, a landing opportunity for these veterans once they come out of an incarcerated status. And we do a lot of outreach, and we work in the prison, and we work with the parole board. And I think, if I may be so brazen to say so, I think that the fact that a veteran has the opportunity to come out and land in the Veterans Transition Center upon release has a lot of pull with the parole board, and they tend to approve that veterans release if they know they're coming to a good program like the Veterans Transition Center. And so we get them there, and we take care of them in transitional housing. They're surrounded by veterans and other incarcerated veterans too who have been released full case management and full wraparound services. And you mentioned that what's the accountability as far as getting each one of these vets in the VA healthcare system, the VA benefit system. 100% of the veterans who come to us, that's the very first thing we do is get them in that program, sir. So I want to allay your fears there. We make sure that happens. And then we try to get them into permanent housing, get them jobs, get them education, get them a permanent income, a steady income, and get them into permanent housing. And I'm here to say that in some cases, some of these veterans in our program, and I want you to know about this because it's important, they go from an incarcerated status, and within 6 months, we have them through our program and out into permanent housing, and they've got full medical, care and treatment. They're in the benefit system. They've got a job, they've got income, they've got a HUD-VASH voucher, they get SSVF support, and they're out on their own and standing on their own 2 feet in self-sufficient status, and that's fantastic. So I'm proud to be able to say we're part of that, but it takes a great amount of collaboration and outreach to get to that point. But I also need to note that we do a lot of these services just out of HUD. We get funding from the VA and from HUD. We've recently lost some HUD funding that contributed to our outreach and our staffing. But we're going to continue to do this because it's important. But we're doing this out of HUD. We don't have any funding for that. So I would like to urge and ask for any sort of financial assistance in finding case managers to do outreach and to help us to keep doing what we're doing in support of these veterans. And I thank you for that consideration, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Roth, any closing remarks?
No, Mr. Chair, just thank you for, it was a privilege to participate in this hearing, and I appreciate your support.
Meeting adjourned.